Hi everyone, Slowly here, and in this video I'm bringing you a complete Marauder Demon Hunter guide for Season 26. So in this video I'm going to cover all the best and most important builds so you can play for Season 26 for the Demon Hunter. That means we're going to cover economic farming, greater pushing, and of course also T16 farming. So that means we're gonna have every single build for the Demon Hunter in this one video here. So let's start off with economic farming. For economic farming, the Marauder Demon Hunter will be absolute by far the best build in the entire game for farming these. Honestly, this build makes every other class and build look like an A tier, while this is something like S+++. That's how strong it is. So I highly recommend that almost everyone should make this build, just so you can use this for farming economics if you're a solo player. And also even for groups, this will be amazing too. Only being beat by a rat group in terms of 4-man farming these. So for the economic farming, we're using the Marauder and we're using multishot. All the other Marauder builds you normally play a cluster, but for this one we're using multishot because of its vast AoE damage. And this build can absolutely completely destroy the entire map because of the AoE potential and clear the entire map in just a second from the multishot just flying out everywhere. So in terms of the gear, we're using the standard Marauder with 5-piece Marauder and then 2-piece Captain Crimsons. We're of course also using Yang's Recurve and Bombardier's Rucksack. So in terms of the gear, of course, Yang's Recurve here, massive multiplier to multishot, and on this weapon you want % damage, dexterity, and area damage or attack speed. And of course, make sure to get a high secondary. This is a direct multiplier to multishot, so get a high secondary here. I would say 190 or above. For the Quiver, Bombardier's Rucksack gives us more sentries. And on this Bombardier's Rucksack, you don't need to worry about the secondary at all. That only applies to cluster arrow. And in here, you want attack speed, crit chance, area damage, resource cost reduction, and the sentry damage. Now, the sentry damage here is very, very important. It can roll between 80 and 100, so we're going to try and get as close to 100 as possible. For the wings, Compass Rose, and Ring of Raggrender. And on the Ring of Raggrender, you want dexterity, attack speed, and critical hit damage. And on Compass Rose, you want flat damage, dexterity, crit damage, crit chance. For the gloves, get crit damage, crit chance, area damage, and cooldown reduction. For the shoulders, dexterity, area damage, resource cost reduction, and sentry damage. For the helmet, get dexterity, crit chance, and multishot damage. Chest piece, dexterity, all resistance, and sentry damage. On the belt and pants, get dexterity, vitality, all resistance. Boots, get dexterity, vitality, all resistance, and multishot damage. On the amulet, travel split, get fire damage, crit chance, and crit damage. And on the braces, Lacuni Prowlers, get fire damage, attack speed, crit chance, and dexterity, vitality. For the legendary gems, get Enforcer, Season of Vengeance, and of course also Bane the Trapped. For the spells, Sentry, Red Polar Station, Companion Wolf Companion, Vault Tumble, Vengeance Darkheart, Prep Punishment, and Multishot Arsenal. For the passive, Tactical Advantage, Ballistics, Custom Engineering, and then also Ambush. And then for the cube, Deadman's Legacy, of course for multishot damage, Cinder Coat for reduced resource cost reduction, and the Scourge Amulet here for more damage. And basically the entire setup here is to try and do as much damage as possible, specifically at the lower levels. You want to try and skip as many waves as possible in the lower levels. Basically from tier 0 to 100, you want to try and skip this as much as possible. You can sometimes skip up to 12 tiers at a time, and that is why this build is so strong. The build's ability to skip these tiers is unlike anything else in the entire game. Now every build that I mentioned in this video will also have a full comprehensive guide linked down below. So if you want to know more things in detail, they will be linked down below. There's more of an overall guide, and also my D3 planner I'm showing you here is also linked down below. Although I will say this, in terms of economic farming, for early game and also if you're playing hardcore, you want to have it like this. You want to play with Wrath of Clarity, you want to have the Evasive Fire focus instead of prep, and of course also awareness here. And we're also playing with cluster arrow instead of multishot. So this setup here is way more tanky. So it's a better early game. I would say use this for the first couple of days. And then maybe once you are about 1.5k Paragon, then you swap to the other build that I showed you before. But this build here will be better for early game and especially for hardcore. In terms of pushing with the cluster arrow, I have a full comprehensive 25-minute long video. So if you want to push really high with the cluster arrow, I definitely recommend checking that video out. But just general things here in terms of that build. Of course, using cluster arrow and not multishot. We're playing with focus, restraint, and also Scourge Amulet. Now, the nice thing about this build is you don't need the stricken. You can still push 140s, 145, even without the stricken in Season 26, because the build has a lot of inbuilt single target damage from the cluster arrow itself. So in PTR, I did a 143 without a stricken in at all. And as you can see, it is close to the other build before. Of course, this time using cluster arrow. So this time around, the Bombardier's Rucksack passive is very, very important. The secondary, that is, increasing the cluster damage. But in the secondary on the Yanks is not important at all. It could be 150 because it ties into multishot and not cluster arrow. And we then have the Manticore and the Q for the damage there. So in terms of your Marauder Demon Hunter, you don't have multiple of everything. So when using the multishot, the secondary on the Yanks is very important, but then with cluster arrow it doesn't matter at all. That means you need a good Yanks for multishot and for cluster arrow, and the same thing goes for the Bombardier's rucksack. So if you ever find items that have good secondary all around, but it might not be useful for your current build, try and have a look if maybe you could use it for another variation using multishot or cluster arrow, because it varies quite a bit in terms of what secondaries are used here. Now, fair warning, this build is quite squishy and requires a lot of kiting and knowledge, but that is explained in detail in my other video that will be linked down below. So if you want to push with the Marauder Demon Hunter this season, I definitely recommend checking out that video down below. I also want to show the Marauder cluster arrow for speed great rift. So for the first couple of days of the season, or if you don't like playing the God DH, I'll definitely recommend making this build here. This will be the strongest and best build for Marauder Demon Hunter for farming great rifts here. This is using the cold cluster arrow rune here with Maelstrom, and of course also cold on everything that we can in terms of the necklace and the braces. And this variation works for both softcore and hardcore. It's pretty tanky and has a lot of damage. But as you can see, these builds are fairly similar. So as long as you can learn one of them in terms of sentry placement, how it all works, you can play all the other builds too. So if you like the Marauder Demon Hunter in general, I would recommend checking out the Equinamia farming, great rift farming, and then also great rift pushing. So this build here is what I'm gonna make on day 1 of the season until I can make my God DH2. This will by far be the best build for farming great rifts in the start here. And if you don't like playing God, then definitely make this build. Now this video is about the Marauder Demon Hunter, but I do have a bit of a treat for you. I do also have a guide for speed farming great rift 90s with the God DH, and then also of course T16 farming with the God DH. So the meta of season 26 here will most likely be farm GRs as fast as you can, as high as you can. This is where a build like God DH shines completely. So in case you didn't know, here in season 26 we have Equinamias, and we want to farm Petrified Screams so we can open these Equinamias. Now the Petrified Screams, they drop from the Rift Guardian in Greater Rifts. This means we want to try and get as many of these as possible, i.e. we want to complete Great Rifts as fast as possible as well. This is where the God DH really shines. This is one of the best builds in the entire game for speed farming GRs, so you can get more Petrified Screams so you can open more Equinamias. So the build I'm showing you now is probably going to be one of the best builds in the entire game for farming these solo with a God DH. It's a fairly simple and straightforward God DH, of course using the 5-piece here, Hunter's Wrath and Depth Diggers, and the 9 series satchel and Yanks Recurve. And it's all about getting damage and movement speed so you can fly through the entire rift as fast as possible. Make sure you make this build, guys. If you're planning on maining a Demon Hunter this season, I would highly recommend first making the other build I showed before, i.e. the cold cluster for greater farming, as that will be a really good starter build, of course because you get the Marauder from the season journey itself. And then when you can, you want to make this build as well for farming lower GRs but faster, because that's going to give you more Petrified Screams so you can then farm more Equinamias where you get a ton of Paragon and free augments. And I do of course also have the same variation for T16 build here with the God DH, and after the Inner Monk of course being the #1 build in the entire game for this, the God DH is number 2. So if you're gonna main a Demon Hunter this season, also make sure to make this T16 build here for farming T16s really fast and efficiently. Of course, you get Great Rift Keystones and Death's Breath. And it's very similar in the setup as well, of course with the 5-piece of God, Hunter's Wrath, Depth Diggers, the same weapons. The main difference is the spells, the jewelry. Basically, this setup here is made for full movement speed because you get so much damage from the 6-piece anyway. And then we're just blasting through the entire rift, running as fast as possible with all this movement speed. You can of course find all of these builds here, all the Marauder Demon Hunter and also the God builds linked down below in the description. I also have a full comprehensive video guide for every build I just showed you now that you can find on my channel as well. But all the builds I showed you now are going to be the best build for farming, pushing everything in terms of season 26 here when it comes to a Demon Hunter. And on the screen now, I will link the full pushing video guide with the cluster arrow and then also the God T16 speed farm build. So make sure to check out one of those 2 videos and I'll see you over there. Peace out everyone.